at least come up and do spoons for you guys. So maybe we'll just do that for a little bit. And we'll send you. All right. That's probably going to be the best part of this morning. Except for the worship, which is great. I'd like for you to turn to Luke chapter 15. Today I'm going to do part 2. And you say, okay, part 2? Well, part 1 was October 2017. It's out there if you want to listen to it. So we're going to pick up where we left off. And so we're going to do part 2 today. But as I mentioned last time, and as I see Luke 15, one of the overarching missions that I've seen in the Bible that God has is redemption. It's one of the overarching things is redemption. Drawing us back, bringing us back when we've gone, bringing us back into the Father's house, back into His arms, back into His grace, back into His love. Jesus told Zacchaeus, He made it clear to Zacchaeus. In Luke 19:10, He says, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." That's why Christ came. To seek, to find, to save, and bring back those that are lost. And then He passed that mission to me and to you. We all share in that mission. There was the boss of a big company. He needed to contact one of his employees because he had an urgent problem going on with his main computer. He dialed the employee's home phone number, and he was greeted with a child's whisper. "Hello." Not knowing what was going on, the boss said, "Is your daddy home?" "Yes." "May I talk with him?" To the surprise of the boss, the voice answered, "No." Wanting to talk to an adult, he says, "Is your mama home?" "Yes." "Can I talk with her?" "No." Oh, this just messed him up. The boss couldn't figure out what was going on, but he needed to leave a message because he had a big problem going on. So he says, "Is there someone there beside you?" "Yes," whispered the child, "a policeman." Wondering what a cop would be doing at an employee's home, the boss asked, "May I speak with the policeman?" "No, he's busy." "Busy doing what?" the boss said. "Talking to Daddy and Mommy and the fireman." Oh, now he's getting really concerned and worried. But then he started hearing what sounded like a helicopter in the background. He says, "What is that noise?" "A helicopter," answered the whispering voice. "What's going on there?" In an awed, whispering voice, the child answered, "The search team just landed the helicopter." Now the boss is alarmed, concerned, a little more than frustrated. The boss said, "Why are they there?" Still whispering, the young voice replied with a little bit of a giggle. "They're looking for me." So sometimes when people are lost and they know they're lost, but they don't want to be found, we run into that too. But let's take a look, and we're going to start back with verse 1. I'm not going to go back through the first 10 verses. I'm just going to read them, so just for context. But verse 1 is really important. At the end of chapter 14, Jesus ended up with saying, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." If you want to hear, listen to what I have to say and hear what I have to say. He says, "Then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him." Okay, so who was it that drew near to him? The tax collectors and the sinners. They drew near. They wanted to hear, what is it this man has to say? The Pharisees and the scribes complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." They were offended. Jesus was supposed to be some rabbinical teacher, and he should know better. They were offended that he was even sitting down there and spending any time with these lower class tax collectors and sinners. They were committed to obedience, to obeying the 10 Commandments God set forth. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And the 613 laws that have been put in place. That's what everybody's supposed to be doing. Not sitting around, not with these folks that seem to ignore that. Unfortunately, these scribes, these Pharisees, they saw the security of their relationship being in their works, what they were doing, checking off the box, doing this and doing that. And they became blind to grace, not really understanding that it was grace that was with them. They saw themselves as something special. And these others, outsiders, worthless, not worth the time. And to be sitting with them, eating with them, that was even worse. Because in sharing meals and eating with each other, it came across like we're going to become one. Like I'm approving you. I'm approving what you do. And we become joined together. So as he goes on with his parable, he targets the Pharisees and the scribes. They're the real target. There's messages in here for all of them that are listening. But he has a special message for the Pharisees and the scribes in this too. And I'm going to read the next 10 verses just again for the context. We're not going to go into them. October 2017. So he spoke this parable to them, saying, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost.' I say to you that likewise there'll be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she's found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost.' Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Although the Pharisees and the scribes, their view of women and shepherds were very low. They didn't think much of them at all. They didn't have any value. But what they did understand is they understood the value that a sheep had to a shepherd. And why he would go search for him, and why the joy when he found him. They understood that. They understood the woman, the significance of the coin. And when she would find that coin and get its value back, they understood the joy that it brought. They could identify with that. So Jesus wanted to go to the next part because he wanted them to understand, now let's switch from things. Let's talk about people. And so he gets into a parable that many of you already know. You've heard many, many times. You probably heard it a lot better than I'm going to discuss it this morning. The parable of the lost son. That's what a lot of people refer to it as. Whoa, I got to not touch all that. Okay. But a lot of the commentators and teachers, they'll say it's the parable of lost sons, plural. Not just a lost son, not just the one. Not just a wild child, but also the older son. The one that stays at home. That's true. What is that? Come on, please, Lord. Okay. Just making the point. Yes, it's true. But I like to see this as the parable of the Father's love. And that's the overarching message, is the Father's love. So as we go through this third part, and it's all one parable, as we go through this third part, I want you to be thinking about the different sons and seeing how maybe we might identify now or at times in the past with them, and let it grab a hold of us. So let's just go ahead and get started with it. Verse 11. Then he said, a certain man has 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. Like the sheep who got lost out of willfulness, we find the same thing here. It's a deliberate choice. The son starts off, he's made a choice, and what's going to happen to him is going to be a result of that choice. He's tired of his place in his life. He's ready, wanting to change it. Don't know what drove him. Could have been anger. Could have been fantasy of what lies over the next hill. The chatter of those in the town. But what we do know is he wanted his terms, his way. He was done with the home. Some of the references say that it was allowable for the father to do this at this point in time, to divide things up and to give it out to the sons. But even if it was allowable, it was very much frowned upon. It was not something that would be done. It was considered dishonorable. It was a serious act of rebellion. And it was noted in previous stories and around. And actually it came to, what could happen? I mean, as you go back to the Pharisees and the scribes, looking at the Torah, in Deuteronomy 21, 18 to 21, it says, if any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of the city at the gateway of his hometown. They shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Verse 21, then all the men of the city shall stone him to death. I mean, they saw rebellion in the family as something serious. And did they do this? I don't know whether they did it. May have done it at times. But what did happen and developed shortly sometime after Jesus, real soon after him, was a little ceremony that they would do when they would bring somebody like this in front of the community, and they would take this pot full of grain and they would crash it on the ground and break it, and indicating you have no value for us anymore. You're no longer welcome. So having rebellion against the parents was very serious concern. And you note that when the son said, he says, Father, give me, he didn't make a request. He didn't say, hey, Dad, I'd like to go try this. Can we work something out? Can you help me get some resources to do this? No, he demanded it. He said, Father, give me. He wanted it. I'm ready. Basically, he was kind of saying, I wish you were dead so I could have what belonged to me and I could get on with my life. So it talks about the father and the son, but where's the brother in all this? That brother had a special position in the family. That brother was supposed to help keep the family together, help keep unity in the family, be the patriarch if something happened to the father, and keep everybody going together. Where was he in all this? Was he there talking to his younger brother? Was he there trying to get him to make some, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Where are you going? He's supposed to try to keep the unity. He's supposed to help protect the family assets, keep everything together, keep it available. Because they had communal style living there. Because we're spread out all over. They were in small location. They knew everybody. Everybody knew each other. They lived and supported each other. So what I had kind of was yours too. And here's this son. He wants to take part of this stuff and leave. He's not just hurting himself. He's not just hurting the family. He's hurting the community. There was responsible. So where was his brother? The one that's supposed to be in, where was he? As we hear a little later, I don't know, maybe we can even draw the conclusion, Maybe brother was part of the reason he was leaving, because of the relationship and the things going on. So he divided to them his livelihood. Now, I don't know. All we do know, we don't know much about the father, but we know he was kind of probably well off. Because later on in the story, we read about having servants. So we know he had servants. So that was one indicator. And then the property that he had to be divided, probably well respected in the community. Again, small community. Probably well respected. Everybody knew him. The sons, they probably grew up kind of privileged because his family owned all this stuff. And he was certainly well known. Everyone knew. Just like in here, a lot of us know each other. And we don't even live in a little small loop. Spread out. Another insight, though, we might draw out of this is how the father responded. You know what he didn't do? He didn't create barriers to keep his son from leaving. Just as our Father didn't create barriers. He doesn't keep me and you in one place. He gives us free will. He allows us to exercise our choice, exercise our free will. The same as this father was allowing his son to exercise his choice. He could have stopped him, but he didn't. But grace. So it begins to show up. We see grace early from the father, early on. As the son demanded, father had a choice, but erred with grace. So when he divided it, the older son was going to get twice the share, and the younger son was going to get a third. In verse 13, it goes on and says, "Not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living." Not many days after. So it's another indicator. Even though the son, when he made his demand, he wanted to leave, he's still around for a few days. But he didn't stay around long. Not many days after, he took his stuff. Now, with the father dividing his estate out, and it including land, and it including animals, and including other things, the son wasn't going to take all this. He couldn't take property with him. He couldn't take animals with him. He had to get rid of it. Get rid of it quick. It was in a community, small community. So he had to fire sale it. Or find somebody on the outside that wanted to buy that land. Quick, cheap. Son didn't care. He wanted his freedom. He wanted his stuff. He wanted to go. He was done. I think many of us in here, sitting in here, if we just reflect back, we can kind of identify a little bit with this young son. I know I can. 18, ready to take the break. I didn't go my far country. It was a quarter mile up the road in my uncle's trailer park. But I was on my own, doing my life, my way, even a quarter mile away. In this young man's case, it says he went to a far country. And we can believe it to be Gentile-controlled, not Jewish-controlled, but Gentile-controlled country that he went to. I mean, he just said, I'm leaving everything behind. All my identity, everything that identifies me, all that I have in the past, I'm done with it. I want absolute everything new. And he goes off to a new place. I'm going to be around people that don't know anything about me. And I don't have to do this and do that to be accepted by him. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have internet. No support. All he had was that cash in his pocket. And likely never had that much cash before. And what he was just thinking, the world's mine. I can do what I want, finally. I don't have to worry about the lectures, no lectures anymore. No sneaking around, no pretending. No, life is his mind. Life is finally, it's good. You may have even wondered, why didn't I do this earlier? Why did I wait so long? Why didn't I do this earlier? We can also get ourselves, as we're going through the story and thinking about that age as the teen, adult, transitional kind of time frame that we know all go through. But as we're looking at this lost son, it could also be somebody that's in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, older. Something's caused them to make a change, to break. Our leaving from our Father, and that's what I'm going to be speaking to primarily. Leaving from our relationship. It may be gradual. Maybe it's just gradual over a period of time, a little here, a little there, and then pretty soon I find I'm down the street. I can't even see the church anymore. Shifting priorities of life. I've got to do this now and do that to take care of my family, and that's important. That's what I got to do. I ain't got time for this church stuff. I got to do all this other stuff. Could be trials and tribulations we're going through. Frustrates us and causes us just to go away. Break from everything we've known. Get out of it. A lot of things, a lot of ages. Don't have to be, I'm 18. To cause this break. He wasted his money living recklessly and extravagant. Squandered it. And the choices he made failed to deliver what he was looking for. He failed to deliver the fulfillment that he needed. In verse 14 he says, "But when he had spent all, there arose a famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything." You know, I think God's timing is interesting too. So after the son had wasted what he had, wasted his money, the famine. It didn't come when he had the money. Had it come when he had the money and the famine come on, maybe he could have made his way through and felt good. I got through that one. But God's timing was great. The famine comes on top of him at the time that he's already hurting. He's already down. Broke. Hard times are now getting harder. He began to be in want. His first want was freedom, and he satisfied that one. And that came at the relationship of his father when he satisfied that first want. Now, crash. Money's gone, his security's gone, his life is empty. He's no doubt sick physically, spiritually. We know that he's missing out on that. He's only had artificial love, whatever he could buy. His friendship, yeah, hey, no, I'm your friend. As long as, what are we going to do today? Yeah, whoa, yeah. As long as you're spending money on me, I'm your friend. You ain't got that money? I ain't got time for you now, brother. I got to do this. He's alone. He's hungry. He's willing to do anything to fix it himself. But hard times have hit everyone. Everybody's going through hard times now with the famine. Opportunities that he may have had, not there anymore. So he joined himself to a citizen of that country, it said. And for a Jewish man, carrying and feeding pigs is an absolute insult. Absolute insult. Pigs were considered unclean. And this is just showing us how rock bottom he's hit. The position that he is at this point. It could have even been, maybe it was even one of these he just kept coming up to this guy, this other person in this other country, and he maybe have understood and knew. And then told his buddies, hey, that little Jewish boy who kept coming around here? Hey, I got him. I put him out there taking care of the pigs. I don't know. It's the way we treat people sometimes, right? So that could have been a reason that he got it. But for whatever the reason, that's where he was, doing something unclean, unheard of from where he was in the past. And if he had eaten those pods, it could have been like quicksand. It may have satisfied a little bit, may have helped him get through something, and it could have just kept him there, kept him longer. But he didn't. And just because we hit the edge of the wall doesn't guarantee we're going to come out. It's going to have to come back to our choices and the decisions. In the October time frame, I shared a little bit about my son when I lost him. You'll hear about that one. But anyway, when I found him, he's standing on the side of the water yelling for cats. He's only 18 months old. He's only a quarter mile from the house. That's beside the point. But he didn't know he was lost. He didn't know the danger. He didn't understand what could have happened with his choices and the steps that he was going to take and the step that he might make. But sometimes it takes us to hit rock bottom. And it's when we hit rock bottom that we'll allow our pride to go away and not be in charge. And honestly examine ourselves and see what we're doing. What are we doing to ourselves and our family and those around us? It's an experience that I don't want to go through. It's an experience I don't want my child to go through, and I know you don't want your children to go through. And God gives us family. He gives us family situations to understand as we feel for our children. Our God, our Lord, feels for me and feels for you. He doesn't want to see us go through those times. But sometimes we have to. Sometimes we need to go through until our pride or whatever the situation is sets aside. We're lying on our back. And there's no place to look but up. Psalms 34:18 says, "The Lord has chosen the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." God is there for us. He's there for them when they're crushed in spirit. Verse 17, it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' His best efforts of his son failed him to satisfy what his true needs and wants were. The pig slop was never going to be able to satisfy his needs, satisfy him. And we need to learn that the career, things, drugs maybe, alcohol, whatever it is we're looking for and we're trying to use to satisfy our needs that we put in place of a relationship with God is never going to satisfy. It may be for a moment, but it's never going to provide the lasting security and lasting love and the lasting satisfaction that we need. My Father, he calls out. He says, I'm going to return. He didn't set conditions. No conditions. No demands was going to be placed. I'll return if I get that bedroom. I'll return if this. I'll come back if that. No, he didn't say that. He's going to return to his family, to his father's house, actually. That's who he mentioned as his father. He didn't say the community. He didn't say, hey, maybe I go back into the community and my buds will take care of me. His only source of hope was his father, and he recognized it at that point in time. He understood his previous disobedience and unworthiness, but with grace, even the worst situation that his father had to offer him would give him life. Make me a servant. That would give him life. He could have stopped there, you know. Again, he's laying there, whatever, and he's got this going through, and he comes to himself. He says, I'll go and I'll do this. He could have just laid right there and he could have changed his mind in the next instant and done something else. In verse 20 it says, and he arose and came to his father. And that's the key. That's the key to restoration. It's not just the thought. It's not just working the things through our mind, but it's putting a repentant heart into action. Getting up and doing something. Following through. He got up. Knowing what faced him. He knew what was going to face him when he came in. When he came back to this community, these people, they knew him. When he came back, they're going to know how he left. They're going to know how he treated his family. So he knew what he was going to be facing, but he knew what he needed. He'd made bad choices. He'd hurt others, but he was repentant. And he was determined to no longer stay where he was. He needed to leave that new lifestyle behind, come back. Zechariah 1:3. Therefore, tell the people, this is what the Lord Almighty says, return to me, declares the Lord Almighty, and I will return to you. He had to return to the Father's house to get things back in line. Verse 20 again, and he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And this is absolutely one of the best moments of this whole parable, was the gracious response of the father. It's kind of fortunate maybe that he didn't meet his older brother when he came back, but it was his father. When he was a great way off, it says. Ay, 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 ay. Okay. When he was a great way off. He wasn't there yet. He was on his way back. He was broken. He was stinky. Probably filthy in appearance. Whatever clothing he had may have been in tatters. He may have been even letting the curse words fly here or there. Smell of alcohol. Don't know what was going on with him. But we got to be careful. Let's don't make it out like when he got up, he came back and he was perfectly a saint. Okay? Because then we put those situations on us and say you can't come back until everything is right. Everything is perfect. And you're doing it all right. It says when he was still a great way off. His father saw him. Why did his father see him? He'd been looking for him. He didn't go out to try to find him, but he kept watching. He kept standing somewhere looking out. Looking out. And while he was away, he could see somebody coming. He's walking like, looks like my son. The way he's walking. He keeps looking. Looks like him too. I'm going to go meet him. So the father goes. And he goes to meet him. He runs to meet his son. Back then, older folks didn't run. Again, it wasn't that they couldn't, but it wasn't the community, and I don't run now either, but the community wouldn't see that. It was kind of a disrespectful for the father to be running. They were in charge, they were in control. But this father pulls his garments up and he charges and he runs back to find that son and to meet his son. Why? Remember, again, what I read earlier. What the community kind of maybe could have done. How they viewed it. How they viewed rebellion. Where it could be stoned. Another situation. The father knew he may not have good reception when he came in, and those that was going to meet him. So the father goes out, meets him where he is, falls upon him, kisses him, hugs him, and walks back with him, comes back with his son. So if you want to say something to my son, you got to say it to me. You want to do something to my son, you got to do it to me. Because his father walked with him. His father was going to be with him. He wasn't going to make his son make it back on his own. It wasn't one of these, oh, I see my son. Yeah, okay, we'll see what happens when he gets here. It looks like he's learned his lesson. I can just tell by looking at him. This boy's learned his lesson, but we'll see when he crawls back in here. And actually, an old rabbinical saying that was found, story is similar to this. When the son came back, father wouldn't allow him to come back. So that's what these rabbis were thinking should be the response. It should have been the answer. And this father runs, meets his son, and falls upon him. What's going on? The father's love. In his book, The Capital of the World, Ernest Hemingway wrote about a father in Spain who had a son named Paco. Because his son's rebellion, Paco and his father was estranged. The father was bitter and angry with his son and kicked him out of the home. After years of bitterness, the father's anger ended and he realized his mistake. He began to look for Paco with no results. Finally, in desperation, the father placed an ad in a Madrid newspaper. The ad read, quote, Paco, all is forgiven. Meet me at the newspaper office at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Love, your father, end quote. Paco, kind of like in my area, Bill, Mike, Paco was a common name. And when the father arrived the next morning, as Hemingway wrote, there were 600 young men, all named Paco, waiting and hoping to receive the forgiveness of their fathers. You know, this is not alone. The situation we're in or a situation we see people in, they're not alone. There's many. We've been there and there's many that are there. And they want the forgiveness. They want to come back. Sometimes they can't. But the love of this father, he never gave up. Restoration doesn't require us to get all of our stuff cleaned up. God will meet us where we are. He'll meet us if we turn, recognize our need, turn, and head back to Him. He will meet us then. He'll be with us. He'll help clean us up if we listen and we truly have our hearts given back to Him. He'll help put us back in that position of His Son. I mean, we're already in the position of a son, but I mean to get things cleaned up in our life so we're no longer doing A, B, C. But He doesn't require, well, you come talk to me after A, B, C is taken care of. God doesn't say that. He says, come. It's His grace. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, which is the way they would say God. I've sinned against God. Yes, he had. And in your sight, his father's sight, yes, his son had sinned in his father's sight. And am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, wait a minute, I know I've been talking a lot, but something is missing. The father interrupted. The son had more to say. He had talked earlier. He had more he was going to say. Where was, make me like one of your hired servants? He didn't get a chance to say that. The father interrupted him. And he told his servants, bring out the best robe. The best robe in the house. It may be his or maybe one that's sitting there for a special occasion. Bring out the best robe and put it upon him. And put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. Again, grace of our Father. These actions, these things at this point in time signified restoration. The Father had restored the Son, putting this robe upon him, giving him, putting that ring on his finger, which made him a family, putting sandals on his feet. He no longer had shoes on his feet, putting sandals on his feet. The servants didn't have sandals. He says, you're not going to be a servant in my home. You're my son. In Zechariah 3:4, the angel said to those, the angel said to those that were standing before him, take off his filthy clothes. Then he will say to Joshua, see, I have taken away your sins, and I will put rich garments upon you. So the Father is ready to restore him. Our Father is ready to restore us, ready to restore any that have walked away. In verse 23 it says, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry, for this is my son who is dead. Ooh, and I got to go quick. And is alive again. He is lost and is found, and they began to be merry. In all the translations, it talks about a singular fatted calf. This calf was special for whatever reason, was being fattened up and taken care of for a celebration. And this was the time that the Father saw. It's now. It's time to celebrate. This part of the story, this was a signal of grace. It was for all. Regardless of the status, grace was for everyone. And clearly a notion to rebut the Pharisees' mind that some people were unworthy. In verse 25 it says, now the older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. The older son, he was always faithful to the needs of his father, working in the fields, doing what he's supposed to do. But unlike his father, he wasn't watching for his brother's return. He'd probably already banished the thought of his brother even coming back. He'd already disgraced the family enough. Don't need to see that boy. Never again. He's no longer family. But today, the older son returned from his work in the fields, and something was different at the house. Music, laughter, dancing. What's this for? He didn't know. We get a glimpse of the relationship with his father. He didn't go into the house to ask what was going on. He didn't call for his father, hey, Father, what's happening? But he calls one of the servants to explain what's going on. I can only imagine when the servant was responding, your brother has come, that he's hearing. This is the way that the older son's hearing it. And the servant's saying, your brother has come. Wah, 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 wah. Your father has killed the fatted calf. What? Put him in anger. Verse 28 says, but he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. How disgusting. Even with a plea from his father to come in the house, he refused to come into the house. He refused to reward his brother's behavior that way. He'd had his fun. He's had his joy. Why are we throwing a party? Jesus wanted the Pharisees to understand. Do you remember the shepherd when they found the sheep? His friends, they celebrated. The woman, when she found the coin, her friends, they celebrated. There was a party. In heaven, and angels, they celebrate. Your brother has returned. We need to celebrate. It's a time to celebrate. He's no longer lost. And so he answered and said to his father, lo, which is more like look. And I love Swindoll's response to this. He says that we need to kind of read these next ones with a very clenched teeth, these next part of the verses. Look, these many years I've been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours, not my brother, as soon as this son of yours came, who's devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. The older brother clearly believed he was the better one and he deserved everything, and the younger son, his brother, deserved nothing. But the Father's grace abounds. And he said to his, verse 31, and he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It is right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. We don't know what happened with his brother. We don't know the situation. What the response was. His father told him it was right for us to have the celebration. What I have is always yours. You need to join. We don't know how his brother responded. He's kind of left with that at the end. Okay, I've got to push on here and finish it up. Sorry about that. But I want you to think about these people that were involved, these sons that were involved. I want you to think about how we receive people that we know that have walked away. If we know people that have walked away for whatever reason, whatever took them away, how do we receive them? What are we doing with the people we have influence on today? Our children, our family that we have now. Pastor Felix said yesterday, he was talking about, he says, people can't see God, but they see you. What you say, do, your example, it's an influence in the life. And it may be an influence now, and it may be an influence later. One of the greatest evidences that God exists is a changed life. Ed, okay, we're going to do something here a little different. And I want to ask you as he gets ready to show this, what impression are you leaving on people so that when they become lost, when they find themselves out there, maybe they come back to it? Okay, Ed. Worship team, come on up. Here's what I want you to, again, think about. The reason I played that is you're going to impact lives. Well, it's like Pastor Felix said. People can't see God, but they can see me. They can see you. And the impressions we leave on people, I don't know when it's going to come into play. I don't know when it's going to have its effect. But I understand being lost from God and being lost from my faith and walked away from my faith because I've spent too many years there. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't until one of these times of really coming to it in the scripture that spoke to me. In Matthew it says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? Sound like the Pharisees, huh? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. That made me question where I was because I thought, okay, I'm safe. And then what was the clincher? My mother's will. Getting influence, you don't know when it's going to hit you. Her last paragraph in her will says, I love all my family. And remember, love your family and God. Keep my grandkids in church. I love and miss all my kids and my grandkids every day. I pray for God to keep you all close to Him and love God. He will provide for you. You never know what you say, when you say, how you say, and the influence it's going to have. So I challenge you. Let's not be like this older brother. Let's not be, let's be loving. Let's join the Father. Let's come into the house. Let's join the celebration. If we know someone that's lost, we found ourselves maybe it's been that lost, let's look at and believe in the Father and what He has to say to us. If you would stand.
Amen. This is not so much a worship song, but a special music song.
Keep measure. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short. When I don't belong, and you say I am yours. I believe what you say of me. I believe the only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity.